Barr first summarized the Mueller report in just 4 pages, but now the full 400 plus are out. We're learning more about the special counsel's legal reasoning, and it's only raising more questions, like whether the Attorney General was right on obstruction.
The report recounts 10 episodes involving the president and discusses potential legal theories for connecting those activities to the elements of an obstruction offense. The Deputy Attorney General and I concluded that the evidence developed by the special counsel is not sufficient to establish that the president committed an obstruction of justice offense.
But was the obstruction decision even Barr's to make? And without actually interviewing the president, which neither Mueller nor Barr did, how do you come to that conclusion at all? 2 former U.S. attorneys join me now. Don Stern, appointed by Bill Clinton, who worked alongside Robert Mueller, both during his stint with the Department of Justice and in private practice at Hale and Dorr. It's good to see you.
Thank you.
Michael Sullivan was appointed by George W. Bush, who also worked with Robert Mueller at the DOJ and is now a partner with the Ashcroft Group. Good to see you too, Michael. Thanks for being here. So based on what you know, starting with you, Michael, do you agree with Mueller that there was no conspiracy/collusion with the Russians, and with Barr that there was no obstruction of justice?
Yes, absolutely. And nothing new in terms of those conclusions. They were communicated a long time ago. The president has said all along, neither he nor his political team colluded with the Russians.
And on the obstruction, you're fine with where Barr came down as well?
I am. I mean, Bob Mueller and his team, dozens and dozens of prosecutors, agents, thousands of, witness interviews. They determined that they could not bring obstruction charges, and the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General have also made the same conclusions.
Are you comfortable with both of those decisions?
Well, first of all, I haven't really read the report in great detail.
Unlike Michael and me.
Exactly.
Yes,
you've got probably little post-it notes on every page. So I want to do that before I really definitively answer that question. But I have great respect for Bob Mueller. So I think on the first one, the conspiracy with the Russians, attempting, in fact, interfere with the campaign and the election, I'll sort of defer, at least for the moment, to Bob Mueller's opinion. The obstruction one is a little more complicated.
Well, here's what Mueller said, but let me just get that up. The evidence we obtained about the president's actions and intent presents difficult issues that would need to be resolved if we were making a traditional prosecutorial judgment. Same time, if we had confidence after a thorough investigation of the facts that the president clearly did not commit obstruction of justice, we would so state, based on the facts and the applicable legal standards, we are unable to reach that judgment. That's a pretty unusual statement.
Very unusual
for a prosecutor.
And my concern is that I think it's pretty clear, the portions that I have read, that Bob Mueller did not intend for the Attorney General of the United States to make that decision. That he decided that it was complicated, the facts were difficult, both because the president does have some legal authority in certain areas.
Meaning Congress should take over?
Exactly.
So why didn't he say it?
I wish he had been clearer. I think when you read in context, what he was saying is, here are the facts. The Justice Department policy says we can't indict a sitting president, so we're not going to waste our time and spin our wheels. Here are the facts. Congress should exercise its constitutional authority and review it.
Do you agree that that was Mueller's intent?
No, I don't think so. First off, if he's saying that the Department of Justice guidelines say we can't indict a sitting president, why did he spend 2 years to determine whether or not there was an obstruction charge to be made?
Well, Barr said in his press conference today that his understanding, even though he said he didn't have the discussion directly with Mueller, is that Mueller's prosecutorial decisions were not based on that Office of Legal Counsel memo, but rather on the merits of the facts as they have.
That's my understanding as well.
That's not what the report says.
It's not what the report says. Right. Can we get to this intent thing? Now, the first line, part of this, the evidence we obtained of the president's actions and intent, I don't get this thing at all, I should have to say. I just wrote down a couple of things. He fires Comey, says Mueller, for refusal to basically clear him. He tells Don McGahn, the White House counsel, to fire Mueller. He has an elaborate plan to mislead the public about the Trump Tower meeting. He calls up Jeff Sessions at home and says, unrecuse yourself. If that isn't evidence of intent, I mean, it's almost like what is the potential defendant, the President of the United States, going to say, oh, by the way, you got me? I mean, did you ever have a defendant like that who said, my intention? No, you imply it as a prosecutor from the actions. Don't those actions suggest a clear intent to obstruct on the part of the actor, the President of the United States?
I don't jump to that conclusion based on what you just described. First off, you have the target of the investigation who says, I am completely innocent of these charges. I have a politically motivated effort over here. Can somebody step in and look at this objectively? And I think that's what he was asking for.
Why would he say to obfuscate the facts on the Trump Tower meeting? What is that about? That's not a... Who's the politically motivated anything? Telling the American people the truth. He says to Hope Hicks, who says this is going to be a massive story, don't give all the facts out to the public. That's not intent to you?
Intent to do what? Not to essentially undermine a criminal investigation. Maybe the intent to say, hey, don't harm me in terms of my reputation in the.
You think all these actions were political rather than potentially
I think
criminal?
Absolutely, yeah.
Do you agree with that?
No, not at all. Look, there are people sitting in federal prison today and have been for decades. In different cases, I'm not saying they're sitting in prison for decades for obstruction, who have been indicted and convicted on much less evidence. There's no question about it. So, just to pick up on the point that you were making, Jim, maybe in your question, when he calls McGahn and tells him to do something, McGahn says, I'm not going to do it, and then tries to persuade McGahn not to basically confide and
tell the truth.
If that's not obstruction, I'm not sure what is.
Can we go further? By the way, another incredible thing, I'll start with you, to me. This is again from the Mueller report. The president's efforts to influence the investigation were mostly unsuccessful, but that's largely because the persons who surrounded the president declined to carry out orders or accede to his request. Consistent with that pattern, the evidence we obtained would not support so and so. So wait a second. To me, as a layperson, which I'm sort of, the president intended to obstruct, but luckily for him, Corey Lewandowski, Don McGahn, and other people refused to do what the president told them to do. So that is the conclusion is innocence. He attempted to obstruct justice, is what Mueller seems to say. He was just unsuccessful because they wouldn't do it.
Well, again,
is that not a crime?
Well, you talk about the word intent. So what was his objective? If his objective was to put an objective person in charge of an investigation to make sure it's not politically motivated, that's not to obstruct the investigation. That's to make sure that the investigation is being done properly. He starts
Fire
from the
Mueller
position.
So we can have a
well, because he
proper...
doesn't trust Mueller.
Well,
he believes that Mueller is being politically motivated.
One of the things about all of this that upsets me the most is the attack on law enforcement. I mean, Bob Mueller is a true public servant who, by all accounts, both sides of the aisle, is professional to the core. And so to impugn the integrity and call him political, him and his team and the FBI agents who are working with him, has really undermined, I think, the American people's confidence in law enforcement. And then the other thing which bothers me is in terms of proper behavior for somebody who was the chief executive and people around him, not just the president. If the Russians, and it's pretty clear in the report, the Russians tried to interfere in the election.
Barr confirmed that today. Yeah. Donald Trump is the only person who hasn't said it unequivocally.
Okay. Pick up the phone, call the FBI. I mean, what's the problem? If somebody approaches
None of those people did, by the way. Nobody associated with Trump called someone like you or someone like you. That crosses a line, doesn't it, even if it's not criminal?
I just don't get it. I mean, these are people who care about this country, who are patriotic. You pick up the phone, the Russians are trying to interfere in the election.
Doesn't that trouble you, even if it's not criminal?
Well, it does. It absolutely does.
Okay,
yeah,
well, I'm sorry, I have so many things I don't understand. Here's one of the things that I thought you were going to talk about Barr when you said undermined credibility, because a lot of people think he was not exactly the Attorney General for the people today, but for Trump, I'll leave that to people at home. Here's what he had to say about the President and his administration's compliance with the special counsel. Here is Attorney General Barr.
The President took no act that in fact deprived the special counsel of the documents and witnesses necessary to complete his investigation.
I thought he was kidding. The only thing he didn't provide was himself. So how can William Barr, with a straight face, say that there was total cooperation with the special counsel when the president refused to meet and testify face to face?
I think what he was referring to is that there were attempts to obstruct justice, but that the prosecutors and the agents and everyone else kept going. They weren't deterred. But that's not the standard for obstruction. I mean, you can attempt to do things and be unsuccessful and still be found guilty of obstruction of justice.
Yeah. Last thing here is: are you concerned? Talking about Attorney General Barr, sharing this redacted report with the President's counsel, I think makes obviously total sense. He shared it with his personal lawyers as well. Does that not violate protocol at least about? Did you ever do that?
Give a report to a defense attorney or
Yeah.
Somebody's attorney prior to becoming public. I'm sure I had conversations with them prior to making a
But never
public
gave them a
pronouncement.
report.
I don't recall. Most often we don't give out the reports. I mean, this is an unusual set of circumstances. Obviously, the report's going to become public and has become public pretty quickly, even if it ends up being unredacted. But kept to be sensitive, I'm sure we'll see the unredacted version. I'm not totally troubled by it in advance of giving a copy to
But
his
you're not
personal
totally
mail.
untroubled by it either.
I think it's an unusual set of circumstances.
We got to go. Michael, it's good to see
Thanks,
you. Thank
Jim.
you so much,
Okay.
Don. I
Yeah,
really
okay,
appreciate
good.
your
Yeah,
time.
thanks.